So a couple sessions ago, we looked at when Jesus would leave heaven in Revelation 19 to come back to earth, and he would come to Petra to destroy the Gentile armies attacking the Jewish believers who were there. And we said that we know he's coming to Petra because of Isaiah 34, my sword will be bathed in heaven. It will come down on Edom and on the people of my curse.
Now, is Edom Petra?
Petra is in Edom.
Okay.
Edom is southern Jordan. Jordan is made up of the old kingdoms of Moab, Ammon, and Edom. So Petra's in Edom. And he rescues the Jewish believers there. They had accepted Yeshua as the Messiah. And we know that from Zechariah 12:7, that he goes there first before Jerusalem, because it says, the Lord will save the tents of Judah first. That the inhabitants, at the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem, do not magnify themselves against Judah.
Now, when he takes these people from Petra, where are they going to go? Back to Jerusalem?
Yeah, to Jerusalem.
Okay.
Yeah. He's not going to take them. They're going to have to go there. He's going to be, once he rescues the Jews at Petra, he's going to continue on fighting his way back to Jerusalem, his way to Jerusalem,
Okay.
to the Mount of Olives. So he's just going to go ahead, and they will have to go there by foot behind him. You know, he's in the air. So that's what we're going to look at right now.
Sure.
Because we didn't cover that before. So Jesus riding a cherub will fight from Petra to the Mount of Olives with fire coming from his mouth. So you can read this one, Psalm 18:7.
Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations also of the hills moved and were shaken, because he was wroth. They went up a smoke out of his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it, like the locusts.
No, that's all.
Okay.
So that's Psalm 18:7 and 8. So it says that fire is going to come out of his mouth. He already has a flaming sword coming out of his mouth. But if you think that, well, that's not feasible for fire to come out of Jesus' mouth, then there's two other cases right here that it happens. First of all, the locusts have fire coming out of their mouth, which is in Joel and Revelation. And also the two witnesses have fire coming out of their mouth. So if they can do it, Jesus can do it. So as far as
going to look just like a chariot or something, and
you mean that he's coming in?
Yeah.
He'll be riding a cherub, an angel.
Oh, I see.
That looks like a horse.
Okay.
Cherubs have animal features, like some of them have the face of a lion, the face of a calf, the face of an eagle, face of a man. So it'll be a cherub with horse-like features, because horses can't fly. So when it says that in Revelation 19, when it says that Jesus is going to come riding on a cherub, come riding on a horse, it's probably a cherub, because let's go back to it a second. So here it says in Revelation 19 that it says, I saw heaven opened, a white horse, and he that sat on him was called Faithful and True. So that's Jesus on a white horse. But it's a cherub, probably, because horses don't fly. And then the armies which were in heaven followed him on white horses. So we will be riding cherubs too, horse-like cherubs. And we know that too from Psalm 18, where it says, he, meaning God, bowed the heavens also and came down, and darkness was under his feet, and he rode on a cherub and did fly. So there it doesn't call it a horse, it calls it a cherub, but it's referring to the same event, the return of the coming of the Messiah in the clouds, with the clouds. So so we quoted Psalm 18:7 out of there, that not only is he going to be riding a cherub, but he'll also, fire will come out of his mouth. So the locusts are in Joel and Revelation. So in Joel, it says, the day of the Lord comes, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, as the morning spread on the mountains. A fire devours before them, and a flame burns behind them. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses. The earth will quake before them. The sun and moon will be dark, and the stars will withdraw their shining. So this doesn't mention in Joel that they're going to have fire coming out of their mouths, but it does say fire devours before them and a flame burns behind them. So they set the earth on fire, things on fire, houses and fields. But Revelation gives more information about these locusts. So you want to read this, Revelation 9?
The shapes of locusts were like horses, and they had tails like scorpions, and the heads or horses
Of horses, yeah.
were the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these three was the third part of men killed by the fire, and by the smoke, and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths.
Yeah, so those are the three things: the fire, the smoke, and the brimstone. By those three things, a third part of the men were killed on earth, according to Revelation 9. So supernatural locusts, have never seen those kind of locusts before, but the earth will see them in the future. And they had fire coming out of their mouths. That's why Joel says that the fire devours before them, and then as they pass by, things are set on fire, flame burns behind them. And the two witnesses in the middle of the tribulation period, I will give power to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days. So they're actually prophesying the whole first half of the tribulation period, clothed in sackcloth. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. These have the power to shut heaven that it rain not, and to smite the earth with all plagues. So just like Moses caused plagues to come upon Egypt, so these two witnesses will cause plagues to come upon the earth. And if God can do miraculous plagues, he can also do miraculous fire coming out of their mouths. So
now this is all localized in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's in
Now,
Jerusalem.
what about the other part of the earth? What's going to happen there?
Well, there won't be the supernatural witnesses, but there'll be the 144,000 going out as missionaries.
So they're going out and what do you call
evangelizing.
Witnessing why this is happening in Jerusalem.
This is happening in Jerusalem. So people will see it on TV, but yeah, this happens in Jerusalem. So Jesus is coming back on a cherub. We're following him on cherubs, and he will have the sword, the flaming sword, like was in the Garden of Eden, to keep Adam and Eve from returning to the Garden of Eden. He'll have that coming out of his mouth, according to Revelation 1, and also Revelation 19. And he'll send fire and brimstone out of his mouth to destroy Edom, and these armies, the armies of the Antichrist. So he has to make his way from Edom, from Petra, to Jerusalem. So here he says in Habakkuk 3, God came from Teman, which is Edom, a place in Edom, and the Holy One from Mount Paran, which is in Edom, Selah. His brightness covered the heavens. His brightness was as the light. Remember in Revelation 1, Jesus is shining brightly. His brightness was as the light. He had rays coming out of his hand, like laser beams. Before him went the pestilence and burning coals. That's the like the fire and brimstone. The ASV says fiery bolts went forth at his feet. He drove asunder the nations, the Gentiles, and the everlasting mountains were scattered. Perpetual hills did bow. You did march through the land in indignation. And I should probably make that more readable. You did thresh the heathen in anger. You went forth for the salvation of your people, even for Yeshua, your Messiah. So the reason he's doing this is to save the Jewish people who are being attacked by the Antichrist armies. So that's why it says you went forth for the salvation of your people. And here it's talking about God going forth, but he does it in the person of the Messiah. God, the Father, doesn't do it. It's Yeshua, the Messiah, the Son, that does this. Even for salvation, you're anointed, Yeshua, Messiah. And then this is the result. So that that's what it looks like that he's sending out, fire and bolts and so forth, lasers, like laser rays. But this is what happens to the people when they get hit by these laser rays. This will be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh will consume away while they stand on their feet. So I guess their skeletons will be left. Their eyes will consume away in their holes. Their tongue will consume away in their mouth. So probably more than just their skeleton will be left. Some of their flesh will consume away, but especially the soft parts, the eyes and the tongue. And it will come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord will be among them, and they will lay hold every one on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand will rise up against the hand of his neighbor. And so will be the plague of the horse, of the mule, of the camel, and of the ass, and of all the beasts that will be in these tents as this plague. Why do you think it says in these tents?
They planted tents there in the battle.
Right, that when the armies all come from all over the world, they're going to have to live in tents while they're fighting the battle. They'll fight
Doesn't that sound like a, how do we say?
Nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
It does, but it's not.
But it's not. It's
yeah,
entirely different than nuclear, right?
Because it comes out of his mouth,
okay,
it comes from his hands and from his feet.
Okay.
But it does sound similar. Yeah. If it wasn't coming from him, would say, if it just said, this happened to them, and it doesn't say where it came from, then we might think it's a nuclear weapon. But we know how these armies are getting destroyed from the Messiah himself.
Now, will Satan be bound for 1,000 years after this?
Yeah, this is he's not bound until Jesus wins this battle.
So is there going to be a lot of destruction in Jerusalem with this battle and everything?
I don't think at this point, because the destruction already happened earlier. If we remember, right before Jesus came, that's what made him come. Well, two things made him come from heaven. To rescue them, but also because they had called upon his name. Israel had a national salvation. But here's where Jerusalem will fall, according to Zechariah 14. This is in the way. I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. The city will be taken, the houses rifled, the women ravished. Half of the city will go into captivity, and the residue of the people will not be cut off from the city. So Jerusalem is taken, and so there's a lot of destruction in Jerusalem.
Is there a temple in Jerusalem at that time?
Yeah, there has to be, because remember, halfway through the tribulation period, the Antichrist breaks his treaty with Israel, and he puts his own image into the temple. There has to be a temple for him to put his image in there, and he stops the sacrifices. He stops. Let's see, where's this? References, view. View the navigation pane. If I search for sacrifices. Results. This is really low. I mean, really. Maybe it's offering. Thought it said he stops the sacrifices and offerings, but it must say he stopped something else. Let's just look at Daniel. So picky. I said sacrifices, but it's sacrifice. So the Antichrist will confirm a covenant for 7 years, 1-7, and in the midst of the 7, that's 3.5, he will cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. So he can't stop, the Antichrist can't stop the sacrifices unless they're already started. So there's no sacrifices in Israel right now, and because there's no temple, they will only offer sacrifices in the temple. So the Antichrist at 3.5 years, he's going to cause the sacrifices to stop. That means they're going to be going by that time. By that time, there's a temple, there's sacrifices. So yeah, for the whole tribulation period, Israel has a temple. I mean, I don't know how soon they get it built.
Now they say this desecrate. He's going to stand in the temple and
he's going to put his own image in there.
Okay.
He's going to make an idol to put in the temple, but it's going to be an image of himself. So that's how he that's called the abomination that makes desolate. It's abomination because it's an idol. It makes desolate because that brings God's judgment upon the earth and destruction on part of Israel. So to get back to, let's see, headings.
So at the end of the 3.5 years, because the desecration, at the end of that 3.5 years, he's cast into the.
No, at 3.5 years, the first 3.5 years, the Antichrist and Israel have a treaty. They have a treaty. They made a treaty for 7 years, right. But in the middle of it, he breaks it. So the first 3.5 years, everything is going along
hunky-dory.
I can't say really hunky-dory, but it's he doesn't break it yet. So they're still coexisting, Israel and the Antichrist. But even though Jewish people are being persecuted around the world, they're allowed to have the sacrifices in the temple. But at the 3.5 year period, he breaks his treaty. He stops the sacrifices in the temple. He puts his own image into the temple.
Okay.
And then the last 3.5 years is even worse persecution of Israel.
So at the end of 3.5 years, the people in Edom, he goes to Edom after 3.5 years.
He doesn't. The people that are in Jerusalem, when they see him put the image, when the people in Judea know that he put the image in the temple, they flee. They flee Jerusalem. They flee Judea, and they go to Petra to for protection from him. Otherwise, he would be persecuting them. So they flee, and he goes there at the end of the tribulation period because that's when Jesus has to come and rescue them at the end of the tribulation period. So right before Jesus returns, that's when he goes there before. He surrounds them, but when they're about ready to fall, then Jesus returns and saves them. They go to Petra so they have protection from the Antichrist during that.
Is that all the people in Jerusalem go to Edom? No,
some of them stay in Jerusalem.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just imagine maybe half going and half staying, something like that. Because not everybody's going to obey Jesus' words. You know, Jesus said, when you see this happen, flee to the wilderness, flee to the mountains. So maybe those are believers, believing Jews that flee. And then the unbelievers are left back in Jerusalem. But then right before Jesus returns, the unbelievers in Jerusalem, the Jewish people, they accept Jesus as Messiah. So maybe that's why the Antichrist doesn't go after the people in Jerusalem until later. maybe he's really going after the Jewish believers in Yeshua. So anyway, they're in Petra, and Messiah comes and he kills the Antichrist armies at Petra, and then he goes from Petra to the Mount of Olives with the rays coming out of his hands and feet, causing the Gentile armies their tongues to consume away and their eyes to consume away. And also the horses and mules and camels also suffer that, unfortunately, because they're with the wrong side. They're being used by the Antichrist armies. And then when he gets to Jerusalem, right outside the Jerusalem, there's the valley between the Mount of Olives and the Temple Mount. There's a valley in between called all right, it escapes me for a second here. The Kidron Valley is between the Mount of Olives and the Temple Mount. So, Jesus made that trip many times. Like whenever he visited Bethany. But that final time he made that trip was when they took him in the Garden of Gethsemane at the Mount of Olives, and then they took him as a prisoner down the road, and then into Jerusalem. So when he comes back, and then after he rose from the dead, he went to the Mount of Olives and ascended into heaven from the Mount of Olives. That's where the apostles saw him go into heaven. When he comes back, he'll come again to the Mount of Olives after Petra. So he's in the air from Petra to the Mount of Olives. When he comes to the Mount of Olives, his feet will touch down and he'll walk from then on. But he'll dismount from his cherub. And but that valley between the Mount of Olives and the Temple Mount is called the Kidron Valley, or the Valley of Jehoshaphat. I'm spelling it wrong. O-N. Here's the Wadi Kidron where it gets narrower. I wonder if there's a view from Mount of Olives to, I don't know if you can see all the way. I would think you can. I would think you could see the Temple Mount from the Mount of Olives. This says Mount of Olives. This says Jerusalem Temple Mount view from the Mount of Olives. And here's also a good view right here with these with this cemetery here. I don't know about this hole in the Donut Cultural Center. Is that on the Mount of Olives? Old City of Jerusalem seen from the Mount of Olives. So apparently, if you're on the Mount of Olives here, you can look down across the Kidron Valley to the Temple Mount. The reason that's important is this valley is where the blood is also called something else. There's another name for this valley. We're advertising. Everything's about money. It's also called the winepress of the wrath of God. So Isaiah 63 says that who is this that comes from Edom with dyed garments from Basra? That's in Edom. It actually means the sheepfold, so it's probably talking about Petra. This that is bright in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. So that's Yeshua, that's Messiah, the Son of God. And somebody asked him rhetorically, why are you red in your apparel and your garments like him that treads in the winepress? And he answers, I have tread the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me. For I will tread them, the Gentile armies, in my anger, and trample them in my fury, and their blood will be sprinkled on my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. So his garments are red as if he just was in a winepress stomping grapes with his feet, like they did, and washed their feet first. But his garments got all stained, but not with wine, but with blood, because this is the winepress of the wrath of God. For the day of vengeance is in my heart, in Jesus' heart, and the year of my redeemed, the Jewish people, is come. And I looked, and there was none to help, and I wondered that there was none to uphold. Therefore my own arm brought me salvation to me, and my fury upheld me. I will tread down the people in my anger, and make them drunk in my fury. Just like wine makes a person drunk, his fury in stomping the Gentile armies will make the nations drunk. So we think of Jesus as a mild-mannered, always nice person, but this is showing him to be a man of war coming to thresh the grapes and tread them in the winepress of the wrath of God. So very different picture of Jesus than what is in many people's minds. So I'm sure that the biblical picture is the correct one and not the picture that we have in our minds. Also, Revelation 19 says the same thing. You want to read this one, John?
Where's the start?
Right here, where it says
And out of the mouth of goes a sharp sword, that with it should smite the Gentile nations, and he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God.
Yep, so gentle, mild, sweet little Jesus, sweet baby Jesus, he smites the Gentile nations, he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. That's the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God is pretty fierce wrath. And that's what Jesus does. He treads that winepress. He stomps the Gentile armies. It says up here that they're I will tread them in my anger and trample them in my fury, and their blood will be sprinkled on my garments. I will stain all my clothes with their blood. And the blood will come out of the wine press. You know how a wine press has a narrow faucet coming out of it.
Yes.
So the Kidron Valley narrows. We saw there was a picture of the Kidron, Wadi Kidron. I haven't really looked this up exactly where it narrows at, but Wadi Kidron images. So it's going to it gets narrow. Always a risk to go. You never know what you're going to get when you go visit these sites like this. I don't know what it's doing.
Is a dead end.
Anyway, so there's a picture. So just like a wine press has a narrow part, so does the Kidron Valley. And then he says that the blood will run out as high as the horses' bridles out of this winepress that's of the wrath of God that's trampling the Gentile armies outside of Jerusalem. I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and on the cloud one sat like the Son of Man, just like in Daniel chapter 2, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. Although this is not the Son of Man. This is an angel, I believe. I'd have to look that up.
When will it stop flowing, the blood?
When it soaks into the ground.
Okay.
When it runs out, when it reaches a wide space and spreads out. I don't know if that runs towards the Dead Sea. And another angel came out of the temple. I'll have to look that up, like where it follow that Kidron Valley and see where it goes. Another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And the angel thrust in his sickle to the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city of Jerusalem, and blood came out of the winepress, even to the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. So you ask how long the blood will reach? 1,600 furlongs. So
this is from the bodies of the people.
Right, from the Gentile armies. A furlong is an eighth of a mile. So 1,000 divided by 8, what was it, 1,600? 1,600. 1,600 divided by 8, 200 miles. So I'm not sure that there is 200 miles from Jerusalem to, I'll have to look and see what the length of that wadi is. But anyway, I'll look into that. So the blood comes out of the winepress, which is outside the city of Jerusalem, and it flows for a great distance. And I'll have to look into that. If I say distance from Jerusalem to Dead Sea, it's not 200 miles, 33.8 kilometers. Is 21 miles. So I don't know if it flows. I have to look into where the Kidron Valley goes. So anyway, Jesus threshes the armies of the Gentiles outside of Jerusalem in the winepress of the wrath of God. And then finally his feet will, after he destroys the Gentile armies, then his feet touch down on the Mount of Olives. That's where he went up from. Why don't you read this about Jesus going up when he left earth, when he returned to heaven?
Then will the Lord go forth.
No, this one up here, this one.
They looked steadfastly toward heaven as he went up. The same Jesus which was taken up from you into heaven will also come in like manner, as you have seen him go to heaven. Then they returned to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, which is from Jerusalem, a Sabbath day's journey.
Yeah. So Mount of Olives is where he ascended, and that's where he'll return. Then the Lord, according to Zechariah 14, will go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. So there's been many times where in the Old Testament where the angel of the Lord fought Gentile armies. And that was Jesus fighting those armies, because he was the angel of the Lord before he was Jesus. It was the angel of the Lord that became Jesus. Although he wasn't an angel, he was the angel of the Lord. In other words, he was the visible part of God. He looked like an angel. This is why he was called the angel of the Lord. But he was actually the Son of God. So anyway, he became Jesus at the incarnation. But he had fought many times in the past as the angel of the Lord. And he will fight against those nations as when he fought back then. And his feet will stand in that day on the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives will cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and west. There'll be a great valley. Half the mountain will go north, half the mountain south. And then you don't really need to read about fleeing from it. It's not relevant to what we're talking about here. And then the Lord my God will come in the person of Messiah, and all the saints with you, all the saints with the Messiah, meaning us coming from heaven. All the land will be turned as a plain from Geba to Rimmon south of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem will be lifted up. I don't really need to give the specifics of the dimensions of this new mountain that will be raised up there. But when his feet touch the Mount of Olives, there'll be a great earthquake, and the Mount of Olives will be made into a like a valley going up to the Temple Mount, running from east to west. This valley is also mentioned, and this earthquake is mentioned in Joel 3. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. That's the Kidron Valley, Valley of Jehoshaphat, the Kidron. The sun and moon will be darkened, and the stars will withdraw their shining. The Lord will roar out of Zion, utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and the earth will shake, so there's the earthquake. But the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So it mentions both the earthquake and the valley outside Jerusalem, the Kidron Valley.
When the people leave Petra, will there be other people coming back to that Petra, or is it going to be vacant?
No, it'll stay vacant, I believe, because that whole area is going to be turned into pitch. So there's probably, when Jesus comes back, he wipes out the armies with fire and brimstone, just like he did Sodom. And he probably leaves a path for them to get out of Petra, to leave Petra. But I don't know if that path will survive, because it says that that whole area of Edom is going to be just burning pitch. So
it's going to be total destruction. There will be nobody coming back.
Nobody coming back. Yeah. I mean, unless he were to leave that little road and just that little place, but I don't think so. I think the whole area, it says that nobody comes back to it. And Revelation also mentions the great earthquake in 16. The seventh angel poured out his vial to the air, and there was a great voice out of the temple in heaven. No, there's a temple in heaven too. It's not just the one on earth. There was when Jesus died and rose again, he brought his actual blood into the temple in heaven. Because when God told Moses to make the tabernacle, he said, make it after the pattern of what you see of the one in heaven. And Hebrews talks about the real temple being in heaven, whereas the pattern of it, the simile of it, or the facsimile of it, whatever, the model of it was on earth, but the real temple was in heaven. And so it came out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, it is done. And there were voices, thunders, lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were on the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city of Jerusalem was divided into 3 parts. So this is more destruction to Jerusalem when Jesus returns, when his feet touch down on the Mount of Olives. And the cities of the Gentiles fell, and every island fled away. So no more Hawaii, no more Cuba. Not sure how big it gets, whether Iceland would be included in that, but no more islands. The mountains were not found, so all the mountains were brought down lower, and Jerusalem was raised up higher. And there fell on men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. And men blasphemed God because of the plague of hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. And then you can read Isaiah 40. It's starting with every valley.
Every valley will be exalted, and every mountain and the hill will be made low, and the crooked will be made straight, and the rough places plain, and the brightness of the Lord will be revealed, and all flesh will see it together.
Right. Glory in the King James Version means brightness. If you look at an old dictionary, an old Webster dictionary, it defines the word glory as brightness, but the new Webster dictionary doesn't do that. So when Paul was traveling to Damascus, he couldn't see because of the glory of that light. It was a bright light that he saw in the sky when he saw Yeshua Messiah. So this great earthquake affects the geology of the earth. So here's another post-trib problem. This is the latest time anyone can meet Jesus in the air, because once his feet touch down on the Mount of Olives, it's too late to meet him in the air. But after his feet touch down, believing Jews in their natural bodies are fleeing and are protected through the earthquake. I guess that's why I needed to leave that thing about fleeing in there. You will flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains will reach to us all. So if it was all glorified people by the time Jesus returned, his feet touched down on the Mount of Olives, then nobody would need to flee because they would be in glorified bodies. They wouldn't be able to die. But these are people in their natural bodies in Jerusalem, and they will flee into this valley for protection during the earthquake, the valley that's created from the Mount of Olives. But if you believe in a post-trib rapture, then everybody's glorified. There's no reason for anybody to flee in Jerusalem after that. Also, it says another post-trib problem is it says that the saints come with Jesus to Jerusalem. We saw that it said, all the saints with thee. They don't meet Jesus in Jerusalem. Okay, then there's a 75-day interval before the Messianic kingdom is set up. So Jesus has now rescued the people in Petra. He's rescued the people in Jerusalem. The geology of the land and of the world has been changed. And now we know that there's going to be 75 days before the kingdom is set up. We know that from this. Why don't you go ahead and read this paragraph?
From the time that the daily sacrifice will be taken away and the abomination.
Oh, no, I meant up here, this part.
He, the Antichrist, will confirm the covenant with many for 1/7 of years. And in the middle of the 7th will he cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of the abominations, he will make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined will be poured on the desolate. So
it's not only the abomination of desolation, but it's also called the consummation, because it's the finishing of everything when the earth is judged for that abomination of desolation. So 7 years is 2,520 days, and 3.5 years is 1,260 days. So that's how we know how long the parts of the tribulation period are. Israel's in Petra for 1,260 days. So from the middle of the tribulation period till the end, Israel's in Petra, or at least part of Israel. The woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So there again is the 1,260 days. But Daniel says, from the time the daily sacrifice is taken away, that's at the middle of the tribulation period, and the abomination that makes desolate set up, that's when the Antichrist puts his idol of himself in the temple, there will be 2,290 days. So we're always hearing about this. I'm sorry, there'll be 1,209 days. We're always hearing about this 1,260 days, but Daniel's talking about 1,290 days. And then he says, blessed is he that waits and comes to the 1,335 days. 1,335 days. So it's 1,335 days minus the 1,260 that we always hear about is 75 days. So the second half of the tribulation period is 1,260 days, but something happens at 1,290 days and at 1,260 days. I'm sorry, at 1,335 days and at 1,290 days and at 1,335 days. So something happens 45 days after the kingdom, after Jesus returns, and 75 days after Jesus returns. But blessed is everybody who makes it to the 1,335th day. If you can make it through those 75 days, it means you're going to go into the kingdom. Of course, we're going to make it because we're already in glorified bodies by this time. But the people that are in their natural bodies, they have to not only survive Jesus' return, they have to not only survive the persecution during the tribulation period, they have to survive Jesus' second coming, and they have to survive the judgments that take place during the 75 days. One of the things that happens during that 75 days is Israel is completely gathered.